Last time it was mostly Alethea, like putting information to help us for other people, but it wasn't really any comments in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
everybody was watching the insurrectionists.
That's what I'm saying, because we didn't have as many people. I think we had like 115 views or something.
Yeah, people were just like, that's what I said. We got to tune in to the last season of the destruction of America, because we're like, this show.
I saw on Facebook earlier, they were like, #American season finale.
I know, right? It was a season finale.
Oh, shoot. Lord have mercy.
And I was really wanting them to yesterday be like, we taking this, this mofo out.
Well, I mean, you can broadcast to sis, the Healing Paradigm page.
Yes, it's broadcasting now. So we're gonna start right now.
I need to put it on my page.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, once we start, we'll start now.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I am a licensed psychologist and executive director at a Healing Paradigm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I want to start today because I have a research mind, and then when I hear terms that I don't know, I have to look up stuff. So I was hearing this term sedition. And I was like, well, what does sedition mean? I decided to look it up. So I want to read this to y'all ladies.
Mm-hmm.
Sedition, in terms of the U.S. Legal code, and I'm not a lawyer, but it says if two or more persons in any state or territory of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the United States government, or levy war against them, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States. Legal code, I'm not a lawyer, but to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they shall be fined under this title and be imprisoned. That is sedition. That's number one. Then I said, everybody talks about treason. I want to understand what treason meant. Treason, whoever owing allegiance to the United States, so technically all of us that has been born here, levies war against them or adheres to the enemies, giving them aid and comfort within or elsewhere of the United States, is guilty of treason. So as I hear those definitions, I'm like, okay, so what we saw on Wednesday was what?
D, all of them.
All of them.
All of the above.
So if you have just joined us today, I am doing a little bit of a pivot. We're having a different conversation because of this moment right now in the United States. So everybody at this point is aware of what happened at the Capitol of the United States on Wednesday. Now, what I will say is that on my platform, I am not interested in giving the seditionist in chief a platform to talk about him and his problematic behavior or any of his minions. But I think today is critical that we analyze what has happened and really just kind of give it some type of critique. So I asked my sisters to come and have this conversation. I want to start out with my journalist, author, and social commentator, Thandisizwe Chimurenga. Comment to me on the media. I know you said you're sick of the media, but I am interested in journalists not calling this terrorism, not calling it domestic terrorism, using all kinds of other language as opposed to calling it what it is, that it was an attempted coup on the United States.
Appreciate you for providing this space on Friday, going outside of your usual what you do. What I saw, I was on CNN watching their newscast, CNN, MSNBC, a little bit of CNBC, and a little bit of Fox. I'll tell you why Fox later. But that was the broadcast. And online, I would see what people would post in terms of links to written pieces and elsewhere. And for the most part, MSNBC, CNN, they would use the word coup. They eventually began to use the word terrorism, domestic terrorists. But that was not the problem for me. And again, with Fox News, they were basically trying to walk back all of the madness they have aided and abetted for the last 4 years. Like now it has come to fruition. Oops, we didn't really want this to happen. Let me see how we can clean this up, right? Whereas CNBC, MSNBC, CNN, they began to call it a coup. They began to call it domestic terrorism. They use the word insurrection a lot. But for me, that was not the issue. The issue was, in most of the media coverage I have seen, the majority of it has been this outrage, this, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening in the United States. This is America. This is not a banana republic. This is not a third world country. Mm-hmm. They have desecrated these sacred halls. I can't believe this. We are better than this. This is not who we are. Shut up. Just stop. Knock it off. Where have you been? Stop drinking your own Kool-Aid. Mm-hmm. Stop getting high on your own supply. This is exactly who you are. This is who you have always been with people of color, with Black people, with the indigenous people, with other ethnic groups, with countries around the globe. This is who you have always been. This hasn't happened to you by your own. This is not who we are. This is exactly who you are. Just knock it off. When I say it was sickening, it actually sent me to Fox News. How deep is that? I had to go to Fox News. I had to run to Fox News to get away from this other nonsense. This other man. I was like, oh my God, I can't take it no more.
So what was Fox News saying? Tell me what were, I don't watch Fox at all. What were they saying?
Fox News was initially, Fox News was giving voice to the fact that perhaps the president needs to apologize. He needs to come clean up this mess. You know, there was the question of Mike Pence invoking the 25th Amendment, i.e. removing Trump from the presidency and him becoming president for these last couple of weeks. But basically, it's been an attempt to clean up all of this nonsense and madness for the last few years. And every now and then somebody would slip through like that. This police chief in, I think, Chicago, who was very sympathetic to the protesters. I mean, it's Fox News. They're on Fox News. But for the most part, they were not so much as, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. It was more a thing of, okay, we didn't really think he was really going to do that. Let me see how I can, basically how can I clean this up?
Wow.
Yeah, but that's all about liability because, one of the things I saw in the Washington Post is, all Trump's lawyers who have been talking about, oh, these voting machines are rigged and Hugo Chavez somehow did something with the Dominion voting machines and all that got people so angry and felt like they had legitimate beef with the election. Dominion voting systems just sued their lawyers for $1.3 billion. I was like, you know what? This is what I'm talking about. Break that in and shit. Because let's be very clear. This is defamation. And so all that thing that happened in Fox News, where they were saying, well, it could be them. They say the Dominion voting machines are jacked up come get some of this $1.3 billion you're going to have to pay out because you sat there and displayed all these conspiracy theories. So now they're like, oh, well, maybe, but Trump should apologize. As if, like I said, you didn't help him spread all of these other kind of things. So Fox is trying to take away, make sure that they don't have any liability for getting these people to the point where they actually believed everything that came out of Trump's mouth. So I don't know.
But I think that is, that's typical. And it's one of the reasons why I don't watch Fox News.
Right.
Because they incite a particular part of the white terrorist organization, also known as the GOP electorate. and that does not want to think, or that they think out of the lens of white supremacy. And then when something happens, then they're trying to back it up.
And they intentionally muddy the water. Muddy the water. I don't know the name of the experts, but CNN had a white guy on, an expert who basically studies Reddit and these back channel rooms where all of these white supremacists gather. And he said one of the things that you're going to see them doing is, I forgot the word he used, but basically it's like they're claiming responsibility for Wednesday, but at the same time trying to blame it on Antifa and BLM. So it's like something about the illogics of the situation, which is what they do intentional. It is they intentionally keep it illogical, so you're trying to figure it out. And that's what Fox does also. That's
because I had time, I was on Twitter arguing with this white woman because she got mad. She was like, I don't see why, I don't condone violence and what happened yesterday, but I just don't see why Democrats won't let investigations happen so we can just get to the bottom of whether or not, any voting irregularities occurred and whether or not Trump actually did win the election like he said.
Girl, please.
Gaslighting. The entire incident.
Court cases, 62. And she said, well, you need to stop looking at mainstream media because there's no such 62 cases. They didn't throw them out. They didn't, Republicans have evidence. And I'm like, why did they not bring it in 62 cases? She was like, well, you need to stop watching mainstream media. I was like, girl, it's court documents. You can look them up, right? Like, this is not a mainstream media versus, And I
don't want us to get far off into Becky and her mentality.
But like I said, I had time.
Let her. I don't have those kind of conversations with people. I just like, okay, so we're not on the same. You don't have the cognitive complexity to have this conversation. So next,
that's a reason.
I don't have time for that foolishness. Okay.
I don't know.
Your thoughts, Estee, on this situation?
I have taken on the ancestral position of being unbothered. That's my thoughts. I decided yesterday that I'm unbothered. I mean, it's because it's traumatic. It's trauma to watch these people scaling the walls of the Capitol, and think about a Black woman being shot dead in her car years ago, like not that long ago.
Miriam Carey.
So to have had both experiences and to compare them in my mind you can't process it. And so I think it's problematic for us to not have a position at all. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm not paying attention to what's important for our nation. But at the same time, I think for us as Black folks, we also have to protect ourselves and protect our spirits and protect our minds. And I feel like this is white folks having their moment with themselves. Some of this is y'all need to have white conference. And God bless you, because this is not the first time this part has happened. So in some respects, it is beginnings of a civil war, because this was the way that occurred the last time. But what's important for us to do is to be clear about the ways that we need to have our own agency. We still have to hold our elected officials accountable. We still have to be in conversations. We can't be absent from the voting and the participation in this process, because it's our democracy too. We didn't come here by choice. It is not by consent that we participate, but it is our agency that's going to save us. And that's the real issue. None of this would have happened to this level of degree if we hadn't turned Georgia blue, which is important. And it's critical. So you want to, because we did something, God bless you.
So that's a good point, because just for a space of transparency, when I was younger, I voted initially when I first turned 18, and then I got like just really disillusioned and super thinking I was so radical, and it's like, oh, it doesn't matter, you know, my vote isn't gonna make a difference. And so I kind of just dropped out of the I keep saying electric.
That's the same thing. It's like strawberry. It means something different to different people. It's strawberry and the strawberry.
I dropped out. But then I started to pay attention. So I dropped out for 2 cycles, and I started to pay attention. These folks are spending a lot of effort to make sure that Black people ain't voting. Oh, no, I'm going to vote. So if they wanted to motivate me to not to vote, they shouldn't have made so much effort to prevent me from voting. That's the thing that made me know, like, oh, no, this make a difference here.
And especially this one makes a difference. I was like, now that we have the Senate after 10 years of Mitch McConnell, who has literally 475 bills sitting on his desk, everything from gun control to funding Black maternal women, you know, health, all this stuff he's refused to look at and sign that's already been passed, right? We can actually do, including starting January 20th, getting $2,000 stimulus, right? Like, and the biggest thing is that now we have the power to hold these people accountable. The reason why these Republicans were in there crying, oh, now we gotta just vote him, and trying to act like they had some remorse, is because they realized with a Democratic Senate, all this, oh no, we're not gonna impeach Trump, we're not gonna do this, we're not gonna do that. They don't have that power anymore. And so now they're trying to back down and say, oh, well, I'm sorry. And so I was like, you know what? This came at the right time because we need to bring the thunder. And so this is the difference. Like, holding them accountable means, okay, now y'all are in power. Mm-hmm. And look at what these fools did. It's unacceptable. It is unacceptable. They should not even be staying in there. If they sat up there and tried to push all like, oh, well, we need to let's pause for 10 days and make sure this. No, you need to go. You need to take your friend. All y'all need to be expelled, because they did it before. Don't act like you can't do it now. You've expelled people from the Senate before. You expelled people from Congress before.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that I heard. I was listening to Katie Couric, and she was interviewing somebody, and they were calling it the Treason Caucus. These folks, these Republicans that decided that they were going to challenge a legitimate election. He's like, okay, that's the Treason Caucus. Yeah. All of those people need to be expelled.
They need to go. I know Corrie has a bill.
It's not going to happen.
I mean, it's not going to happen because
but it needs to be talked about and voted out, and they need to be limited, right? Like, whenever they want to open their mouth to fix their mouth about what they're not going to do, we need to be like, whoop, whoop. You know, remember, you sit down, because remember when you were trying to break down America, so you ain't got nothing to say, so bye. So that's what I look forward to Kamala Harris doing that, because I know she will, right? Like, I wish she would come out your mouth.
So
yeah, she will.
We'll jump into that. Hold on for a second. Let me just acknowledge our audience, because we got lots of folks. Y'all give us some energy. Say hello. Let us know if you have questions, comments. What are your thoughts about all this stuff that's going on? I think Kamala, well, and I ain't gonna blame you, because you're not an AKA. None of us are on here as sorority folks. We didn't get our sorority folks today. But you know, I'm gonna give it to her because she's a sister. I'm gonna give it to her because she an HBCU grad.
She already has, and I think that's one of the biggest. I mean, I'm not up here to be a big Kamala stan, but one of the things I do know about her, because she already has. You should see the way she talks. And when she was, she almost had, what's that, the guy who was in the Supreme Court? She had him crying, right? Like, she was like, no, you ain't gonna be marching up here talking about all of this stuff. Like, and even with the way she sort of did Pence, I mean, we're very clear that she's not going to be in there letting white men talk over her, try to excuse their actions, trying to do anything else, because she hasn't already, right?
Well, and so what you're talking about actually to me is that complexity that we have when we look at supporting Black women. Now, any sister that is talking and a white man try to talk over her and she's like, I'm talking and go back to talking. Okay, I'm gonna give you some dap for that one. But that doesn't mean that we have to all be on the same page.
That doesn't translate into power, though.
It doesn't.
But so this is one of the things. It's not about one person's power, and that's what frustrates me about when people who don't want to vote or don't want to say, well, I ain't going to participate in whatever. It's because you think it's one person that's going to do anything, and one person ain't going to do anything.
I don't think that. I don't think it's one person.
No, I don't think it's about one person, but I think when it comes to Kamala, I think it's a different game to play. It's a different position to be in. And so I think the politics of that, I don't know that we can determine until we see what her track record and her experience of it is. And I think that just comes from me watching her before she was even running for office. Right. On a national level. I mean, she had a very different position from what I might have expected when she was on the state level. So I don't necessarily have bad expectations. I don't know yet.
Yeah. You're in California. Tell us from the perspective of being a California resident, born and raised.
Well, but she was in Northern California though, and I'm in Southern California.
So she was Attorney General in California too.
She was a prosecutor before that, and then she was Attorney General for the state. And I really didn't pay attention to what she was doing other than locking up the most vulnerable in terms of truancy. But at the same time, and this is what people have to understand, we get happy when a Black person gets a job. We've got we're angling for Black people to be in Biden's cabinet. So we have a Black Attorney General. We get happy to have Black faces in high places. They're taking oaths of anti-Black institutions. Mm-hmm. They're taking oaths to uphold anti-Black institutions and anti-Black documents. So on the one hand, I'm not excusing Kamala Harris. What I'm saying is it's her job to lock up the most vulnerable. Prosecute and persecute, the root of the word is the same. And in an anti-Black white supremacist society, who's going to be prosecuted and persecuted? Who's it going to be? It's going to be Black folks. That's who she's going to go after, unless there is a sustained movement, a sustained way to reach her. Because what we've got now is we've got a district attorney, I'm told, in San Francisco who came in the door, not even before he got in the door, who ran on, I'm going to get rid of money bail. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. His name is Chesa Boudin, and he's the son of white anti-imperialists, white revolutionaries. So he's been around that all of his life. The thing about an Obama or a Kamala Harris, they would not have gotten to the heights they have gotten had they not been down with this American project, had they not been down with this anti-Black project. So, we can talk about what we think she's going to do. We kind of have an idea of what she's done already. But then again, we've also had this movement from this last summer, the likes of which we have not seen in decades. Here in Los Angeles, we just got a prosecutor who's saying all beautiful, wonderful things that he fought against when he was a prosecutor in San Francisco. He's read the room. He's taken the weather vane and said, okay, I need to do this. And in his inauguration speech, the day he got inaugurated, he said, I'm not going to seek the death penalty. I'm not going to seek 3 strikes. I'm not going to do gang enhancements. I'm not going to try juveniles as adults. I'm going to end money bail. So people have been on him for this has been a movement. I don't know if Kamala has paid attention or if there was not enough of a movement. Everyone kept saying last year before the election, well, let's get Biden and Kamala in, and then we can move them to the left. And we've been seeing indications thus far from Biden, he ain't going to be moved. So we need to figure out what it is we're going to do. And I think that was a long roundabout answer to your question. So jump in.
think what you said though is significant. Is that the reality is that these are politicians, and politicians know how to read the room. And so, if we look even back just recently in the general election, we had the election for the Fulton County, which is the major county here in Atlanta, the Fulton County DA, and I listened to the debates because there was 3 candidates when initially, and the presidential candidate, he got the least amount of votes. The person that ended up replacing the old DA, I was not happy about. But what I did find that was really interesting is that you would have thought all 3 of them had big old afros and black power fists the way that they were talking in that debate. Like, everybody was trying to sound extremely radical.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm bliggity black, and I'm black, y'all.
And that's exactly what they're trying to say. And I'm going to let you go, Corrie, in a second. And so we have to be able to read the room. I see Eric Bowens. He writes this comment about being able to seek equality and justice and recognition of the atrocities that have happened to African people and have a real conversation on reparations. And I think that ties into this. So 20 years ago, nobody was talking about reparations except for in Cobra. But nobody, that wasn't part of the
John Conyers introduced, John Conyers, who'd been in Medicare for All, introduced a bill for 28 years about reparations.
That's true.
28 years. And John Conyers would work
mainstream conversation. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't a mainstream conversation.
It was a mainstream conversation in Congress, right? Like, so what? When you introduce a bill, you still got to talk about it. So there's a lot of other kind of discussion about why it didn't go forward, obviously, because it's white people and he was kind of, by himself. But he, Maxine Waters, all these people that we are acting like, because they've been in there a long time, they're radical in their spirit. Like, even Maxine Waters, every day Trump was in office, she's like, I'm going to get you. You going to go. I'm going to do everything in my power. I'm like, shut up. She was, and then when, he was speaking the first time, she was like, well, here we go. Like, we going to do this. Like, and I think that we don't give these people enough credit. Like, even if they've been there and they hadn't been able to get things passed, because unfortunately, that's not the way our democracy is set up. Again, one person can't do it. But I do think people have been, I can't say about the DAs, and I voted for Fannie Willis, but I can't really say about her background. But one of the things that, going back to Kamala, like, people were always talking about, look at the truancy policy. I was like, do y'all know what the truancy policy is in Fulton County? Have you ever looked that up? If you miss 3 days of school, you will be assigned a parole officer, right? You're automatically put in the system in terms of, if you then miss any more days, your parole officer can start recommending that you go in a home, like that you have to get into the criminal justice system. It is far worse.
So what are you saying, though? Are you saying that we should be happy?
What I'm saying is that people, I'm sorry, what?
So what are you saying, that we in California should be happy the truancy policy?
No. What I'm saying is that the truancy policy that Kamala put in didn't actually put any parents in jail. We have people going to jail every day off of some 3 days they missed school, and hers was 34, 50 days, something like that, and nobody went to jail. We have people, and we would be so critical and talk about, what do we do? Why are we saying that, let's look at California and not looking at ourselves? And this is what I'm saying. Like, it is a whole, I think that when we talk about electoral politics, it's easy for us to say, well, let's talk about this, what it means at the national level, but let's not talk about what's happening on the local level and where I am and how this is going to affect what I do. So my thing was, like, at least Fannie Willis is not going to be like the old boy that just got out that had this truancy policy that was far worse than anything else that they had in California.
And so we'll come back and have a conversation in a year about Fannie Willis. I did not vote for her. She is extremely problematic. I'm very clear that she's problematic, and I think that she's going to be worse. But that's a whole other conversation.
Well, I knew what we had was
the brow of Estee. I wanted to hear what you were saying, Estee.
So don't forget, we got to talk about sociopathy and psychopathology.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We need to. Sorry, we got off on Fulton County. My bad.
All of the iterations of white supremacy. I mean, I think for me, all of this it's the same circle, and we can get on the hamster's wheel a little bit, which was why my brow was going up, because it's like the chief of APD that we just forced out is now being brought on in Louisville. You know what I mean? So it's like after everything that happened, and now when we go past the Wendy's, it's gone. In addition to the Black lives that were lost, and she's just been moved essentially. Right. So I'm less interested in the people and the names and the figure and what are we going to do about the system and the agency that we have in our own communities to be doing revolutionary stuff amongst ourselves that creates this. We've created this problem. Stacey Abrams and Latasha and the list of Black women organizers who have been trying to turn Georgia blue and doing the work in these rural counties for the last 10 years is how we got here. Black women did this, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can harness that and name that and organize around that in every area, I'm more interested in that than I am in the names of the figures, because we're going to have to make these changes happen and hold people accountable to the fact that we're not taking the BS anymore.
Well, and I think that's one of the things. It's like it's a long game, right? So Stacey.
Okay, so Corrie, I'm gonna put a pin in that. So it's a long game. I'm gonna put a pin in that.
Okay.
Pivot us, okay? So I want to read y'all something, okay? And let me just say this. Because I got to be still able to keep my lights on and keep doing this kind of stuff. So I am a psychologist. And part of what happens as a psychologist is if I have not sat down across with you and you haven't considered for me to treat you or do a psychological exam on you, I can't diagnose you. So I ain't saying I'm diagnosing somebody, but I'm going to tell you my good common Black woman sense about some stuff, okay? So I want to share with y'all something. So I'm going to read this. This is these are the diagnostic criteria. So all of y'all that's listening online, I see it's lots of folks that's listening to us right now. I want you to hear this. So for psychologists, there's this thing called antisocial personality disorder. And there's 7 criteria, and you only have to meet, let me see, current sense, you only have to meet 3 of these criteria out of 7 to be diagnosed as antisocial. Failure to conform to social norms, that's 1. 2, deceitfulness. 3, impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. 4, irritability and aggressiveness. 5, reckless disregard for the safety of yourself and others. 6, consistent irresponsibility. 7, a lack of remorse. Now, when I read that stuff to you, does anybody come to mind at all?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, listening to me. If you heard those criteria, I want you to put it in chat. When you hear all of those things, did anybody come to mind?
One person and lots of people come to mind. Yeah.
One person in particular. I want to know what's the number 1 person when you hear all of this criteria for
orange
personality disorder.
He's orange.
To mind.
Somebody called him Toupee Fiasco. I like it.
Yeah, he's orange. I can tell you that much.
So what we can talk about is that Mary Trump, who we know is the sociopath in chief's niece. Biological niece, said that this man has antisocial personality disorder. Mm-hmm. And you got other people, whether or not they will say that, that are mental health professionals. I just read you 7 criteria. Now, how many of those did you hear that sound like they went with this individual?
Real quickly, how often do you see people who hit every single criteria?
It's actually extreme.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it seems like you can't have every single one.
Yeah, like at that point, does it become something else? You know, like when you get 100%.
No, you're talking about the level of severity and the danger.
Oof.
Damn, we ain't got nothing else to say.
I mean, because we're just like, dang.
So, and let me put this in context. So let's just think about let's think about some antisocial folks. And this one is the one that gets me the most. So we can think about Hitler. I mean, you can just boom off the top of your head, and you can think King Leopold and all of them Europeans that were over there in the continent of Africa engaged in transatlantic trade in human beings. So you can think about that. But one of the ones that is, to me, one of the more scary ones was Jim Jones. And let me tell you why. Because if you think about Jim Jones, he used religion, he used a social justice movement, and he used the idea of equity for Black people to further his mission, which allowed him to kill hundreds of Black people. The vast majority of those people that were murdered, and that's what I call it, is murdered in Guyana, were Black. And because he was talking about things from a social justice perspective. So you can have two different kind of perspectives, I think, on two different ends. So what we saw in this election cycle, in the last two election cycles, is like this campaigning on white supremacy. And you can see that as antisocial behavior. And campaigning against social justice. But then you can have somebody on the other extreme that is campaigning and connecting with people around social justice and can seem like they're down for you, and you can die.
But there's always, but this is my thing, because I watched, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just dark, but I watched this documentary about Jonestown, and one of the things that was really fascinating to me, because I was like, oh, you know, he was like socialism, everybody's equal, but his inner circle was all white. That's A, which would have been a red flag to me, because you're sitting here talking about we're all equal, yet in this place that you recreated, it's the same, you know, circle where the people who were, you know, up here are all white. You know, he had all this kind of sexual deviance that was going on, and they would know it. They would get together, have orgies and whatever. And Black people were like, oh, well, we wouldn't participate, but we didn't say nothing. What? Right? Like the inner circle's all white. They're getting together, you know, having these orgies and whatever. You're just like, well, he's talking about we all equal.
And the thing was that he wasn't discriminate. You know, it was with men and women. So it was right. For him, it wasn't about sexuality. It was about power. Because anybody that he wanted to control, he was happy.
Right. They would all, and it was kind of like secrecy, because people would know what you did. So after you were participated in all this other kind of stuff, you know, they could be like, oh, but you know, I could just out you to so-and-so and so-and-so, or I could say this and this and this and this. But I was always like, before they went to Guyana, right? So all that stuff had been happening. So I was like, at what point do you think that people lose the ability? Because I would be like, are you really a man of God? I would have started questioning that at the moment the lack of people in the church to have the orgy, at the moment where you're not doing the things you say you're doing. And I'm like, at what moment, you know, does that not click for people, right? So even if somebody...
I think you have to take it out of the intellectual and the cognitive and think about your heart center. Like if you believe in a person and you believe in a group, we have to be careful with that. That's what we're seeing now. These people believe in 45.
That's what I was gonna say.
They believe in 45. You know what I mean? Like in a way that we might call on the name of Jesus. Like they're like 45 said that it was stolen. Huh?
I know. I was like, you really in some evidence not seeing, because it's like there literally is no evidence.
Yeah, because it's not about evidence. It's not about
it's not.
It's not about, I mean, even the policies, these aren't, none of the policies of this last presidential term have been about poor folks. That's not who this is helping. So it's not, so you can't make it make sense that way, because that's not the point. The point is we believe in whiteness. This looks like the whiteness we like. This looks like the whiteness that we know and understand, and we're committed to keeping it.
Okay.
No, but even evangelicals who said the only reason they voted for him because of the abortion, they want abortion to go away, right? Like
you can put a pin in that. Hold on for 1 second, Corey. I want to hear what Tani was saying. Tani, what were you going to say?
I wanted us to get back to what happened on Wednesday.
Okay.
No, I know. We done. We in Guyana right now.
That's something or another, but I'm glad, and Estee, you led us in that direction in terms of the sociopathy and psychopathology of what happened on Wednesday. That's what you had mentioned you wanted to get into, and that's what I wanted to get us back to.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for us to be able to talk about that. I want to make this distinction. So kind of a new term that people say is like sociopathy, and and kind of a layer older term is like a psychopath. And the formal diagnosis, just so y'all know, the formal diagnosis is antisocial personality disorder. And what we see is that oftentimes, I mean, you can just tell by the criteria that I read that people end up in jail. Mm-hmm. And they end up in jail, well, if they're not white males. And they end up in jail because they're doing stuff that is like seditious, like encouraging people to riot and try to incite a coup against the United States government. So that is not an unusual behavior. And the thing that to me is really interesting, and I said this to a colleague several years ago when old boy got into office, because it was very clear by his behavior. You know, even if I haven't sat across from him and diagnosed this, I'm like, okay, I see what this is. I know how this is going down. And you got the FBI, the CIA, all of these security agencies, with the domestic ones and the international ones, they all have psychologists on staff. They all know what a personality disorder looks like. They all know that this is dangerous. So they knew on Wednesday when they heard that man, and they were on all those social media sites, and they're looking like at Reddit and all these different sites and Facebook and Twitter, when people were organizing, they knew what was going to happen. It wasn't a surprise.
They knew in 2016 what was going to happen.
Yes, they know it, and that's my point.
Aided and abetted it. Every last one.
That is my point.
I think specifically they knew on Wednesday, which is why there was no response. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Which is why there's one person who was shot. You know what I'm saying? One woman. That's the issue here. That's the problem here, because if a Black woman can have a mental health crisis outside the gate and get shot in front of her 18-month-old, but we can't seem to have any kind of organized way to stop these people from getting into Speaker Pelosi's office?
So I had to look this up. They said there was 2,200 Capitol Police that work at 9 buildings. 2,200. The 2,200 were not there. They said that Muriel Bowser had asked previously for National Guard. Trump fired everybody in the DOD, and then the people that were in there denied her. So they also say the DOD gave them directions to the Capitol Police, and they said they are not to engage with anybody. They can't do anything. They can't respond to anybody unless their life is on the line. They didn't even give half of the people weapons. They told them they were not allowed, for most of the people outside, to carry guns, nor were they allowed to do anything. Now, my thing is, you know that they planned this because he fired everybody in the DOD and basically put an intern over there and then gave them these orders. And then people act like, well, why didn't they respond? And this is why you know it's a coup, because they said he planned it, just like with the post office. Let's destroy the post office and then be like, oh, well, y'all could get y'all balance in on time, right? It's like, let's tell them you can't do anything to people and then be like, oh, well, you know, they were overwhelmed. They weren't overwhelmed. They were handicapped, right? And we're not allowed, you didn't see them in riot gear because they weren't allowed to wear it. So I was like, oh, that's on a deeper level. I mean, it's the whole people taking selfies and all this other kind of stuff is because they're white supremacists, and they were probably embedded in there, you know, opening the gates and letting people in.
Did you see the video of the black Capitol cop being pushed up the stairs?
Yeah, run up the stairs.
You've got a baton. You probably have mace or pepper spray. I couldn't tell.
Yeah, but he wasn't allowed to use
have mace.
You've got a gun, but most importantly, you've got a badge and you've got the authority. And he's running from these white people, trying to get away from them, when he could have very easily stood there and opened up.
I honestly think he was not allowed to carry his gun, because from what I read,
you can see it on
in Washington
You
Report,
can see the gun.
But
You
was
can
it for a taser?
oh no, they said they didn't allow them to put ammunition in the guns. That's what it was. So they might have had it.
Regardless,
They didn't authorize any ammunition to be used. The people who were inside,
whether or not they were allowed to have, regardless, what we know is what we saw in June when there was a coalition of Black people, white folks, you know, First Nations people, when there was a coalition of folks that were talking about stop killing us, stop putting your knee on our neck, when we should be able to sleep in our own damn bed and not get shot. What we saw was violence to a response of treat us like human beings. Mm-hmm. You know what? Just treat us as equal to the fucking dogs that y'all love.
Like I said, I live by the burnt out Wendy's. I heard the tanks going down the street.
So then what we see on Wednesday, we don't need to even get into the highest
levels.
White supremacy.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, white supremacy given license by certain people who will not call it what it is. So my thing is, if every police officer is a white supremacist, defunding the police ain't really gonna do, like, even if you had more police, right? Like, we're at this level of talking about what does it mean to be a police officer? What is your duty, right? And I don't think we don't have a definition. I think half those white people think that their duty is to stop and curtail Black people. Like, somebody told me there was like white people Apple Care. Like, they called them police. It is just like they're supposed to fix all their problems.
I think that, I feel like, I don't know if Njamile said it or Tani, did you say this? There's a book, there's some good books that talk about the history of policing, you know, and going back to patty rollers and, you know, just attacking and accosting enslaved Africans. And so we know that history from the beginning of patty rollers and to current day policing. So we're not surprised anytime that we see police behaving in this way, or anybody in law enforcement. So
but it's also been what we don't talk about. We don't talk about the policy of when Black people were allowed to become police. They were not allowed to arrest white people.
Right.
They were not allowed to arrest white people.
And that's what
variations of that all the way down to right now today. Black police officers you don't hear about Black police officers shooting white folks.
Well, no, that's not true.
No, you don't know. You don't.
We heard about it. Wait a minute. Hold on.
No. I'm not talking about a couple of incidences.
No, but listen to what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. You hear about it in Minnesota, and remember the brother in Minnesota shot the white girl, and what happened?
That's one.
Exactly. One. And so he went to jail for shooting her.
We don't hear about it, and when we heard about it, it was a reminder to the rest of them Black cops: don't y'all do that. No,
exactly.
Right.
Don't do that. You don't hear about Black cops. I think it was the two Black cops in, was it Louisiana, that ended up shooting the car and killed, if not killed the driver, killed his son. One of them got like 40 years. Mm-hmm. So you don't often hear about Black cops shooting white people. When you do hear about it, they are reminded. They are slapped on the wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like you had this other cop who's running from people in the Capitol.
Right.
But like the war, they send us out there with no weapons and be like, go get them, right? Like,
well, that's what we're told. We're told that the cops were not armed. But what I'm saying is this is what we actually saw. This cop running from, and you've got the authority. So it goes back again to the question of power, but there's also a psychological issue at play. And I think it's interesting that you use the word sociopathy. I was told, don't ask me by who, because I don't remember. There's psychopathology, there's psychopaths, and there's sociopaths. And only a doctor can diagnose someone as a psychopath. So I can't call someone a psychopath, or else I might get sued for slander or libel. But I can call them a sociopath, because that doesn't take a medical diagnosis. I don't know. That's what I heard.
No, because the only diagnosis that we have is antisocial personality disorder. That is in this big old fat book,
DSM.
The DSM.
DSM-5.
That is the diagnosis that's in here. So there is kind of this debate, and it's more of like the debate within the field of like, are there differences? And so you can look at stuff online, but the only diagnosis we have is in here. You're not going to get sued for that unless you're going out and putting signs. I mean, but if you call somebody, I mean, anything, if you're, libelous, then it's going to be problematic for you. So it's regardless. So there's no, like, you can only say that if you're a doctor and stuff like that. You can say
that was what I heard. But the way that I would get around it is I would quote Dr. Bobby Wright from Chicago. Talking about the psychopathic racial personality in regards to white people. He called y'all psychopaths. I'm gonna call y'all psychopaths.
Now you make me want to pull my book. What were you gonna say, Estee?
Yeah, I just want to go back to this question about power, right? Especially with the Capitol cop that's Black, which I think is actually probably a place where we have more than we can discuss from our own personal interest, right? Because I do think there's a way that we have to be able to own our own power and authority. And I can imagine if even if it were me and who I was and what I knew 10 or 15 years ago, if it's a bunch of white people running at me, I'm about to run. I'm getting the hell out of here. I don't care what I got, what's in my pocket, what's on my waist belt. I'm hauling, right? But there's a education, right, that we have to do in our own organizing to be able to take up our space and to take up our power, which is the power of what Black Lives Matter did last summer, to go and stand in front of rows and rows and rows and rows of armed National Guard and riot gear and go anyway and be unapologetic and be unmoved and be unbothered by saying, we're going to demand what we deserve. We're going to demand our own humane rights. And we're going to come to the Capitol to do it. And so I think we have to also name that part of what had to have been his experience, that these crazy folks who I know will hang a Black man from a tree are running into that, like they are in here in the middle of a joint Congress session inside the building. And not that, yes, we do need to own our power, but what does that take? And where do we have to come from in order to do that? And how do we get more and more and more Black and brown folks on board with their own power? Because that's the place where we have our work to do, and we're having success with it.
Well, and what you're saying is, I think, important. And when I'm looking at it, when I looked at the video and I've heard kind of different aspects and different theories about why he was running and what his response was, what I know is I don't know what was in that brother's head. I like to think that in these spaces, particularly when I show up as a psychologist and people try me, that I got all this mouth because I'm from South Central Los Angeles. But I don't know what I'm going to do in that situation, because thank goodness I have not been in that situation. But I know as much as possible, and this is the thing that I'm always pushing our people to do, is take up all that damn space. Period, point blank. I mean, this is simple. This ain't even the same thing. But I remember me and my girls being in a line. We were traveling in a different country, and we were going through immigration in a different country. And, my girls are standing behind me. We're like all walking in the line. And this woman, little short woman, comes and she steps in front of us. I moved her. Come on. And I'm always telling my girl. Don't let nobody stand in front of you. I don't know what's going down. She don't speak the same language as I do. I don't know what her motivation was. She ain't getting in front of us. Period, point blank. Now, I like to think that I'll be big and bad as somebody running up some stairs at me, but I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, for me, it makes me think about conversations that I had with my grandmother. Y'all know I'm from the Deep South. My folks are from rural Georgia and rural Alabama. And when I got excited and got in college and was protesting and was like, Grandma, what did you do in the movement? And she was like, baby, I was scared and I wanted your granddad to come home. like, I wanted my children to live. And it was so humbling, really, because I had to think about the physical violence that she was experiencing just in being a school teacher every day that I wasn't experiencing protesting as family. You know what I mean? Like, running up talking about being queer, black, and free, which I still, I mean, it was the right thing, right? And it has its place and it's important. And I'm glad that I was able to, am able to live a life where I take up my space unapologetically. But I'm doing that because my grandma made sure my granddaddy got home safe at night. Right. And so I think we have to make space for all of those experiences and that there's agency in those places. And if we can do the work to make sure all Black folks are taking up their agency wherever they are, then we're going to have a whole different kind of conversation.
And I think that,
on the Capitol.
Yeah, what it means to be brave looks different in different spaces, right? Like I told my students even this summer that going out to protest is not a small thing, right? Like it's not something to be taken lightly. You could lose your life, right? Mm-hmm. These people, they don't operate by this sort of, I'll recognize you're here for a just cause, you're not coming with violence. They do not care. And one of my poor students found that out because he got tased, driving in his car home because curfew hit. His tires were slashed by the police. He got tased in his back, right? This poor boy. And he was like, all I was trying to do was trying to get home, right? So, and we understand that there are very, very real consequences. So I never tell people. And so for that police officer, even if he was running to save his own life, even if he didn't want to be that Minnesota police officer, because he knew if he did something to these white people, he'd be put under the jail. So he was like, what I'm about to do is to preserve myself and my community and get out the way, because their justice is not for us, right? Like it's not going to be for me. I know they're going to say I did something. So let me get my butt out here and then.
Which is a systemic issue. Which deals with the system.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that we can't just say, well, he didn't claim his space, because he probably did, right? Like, and like, as they said, my grandmother did not let white people come on her property, did not let them step her porch, did not let them, she would literally be like, I remember her, she had a flat tire once, and, this white man came up to help her. She went right out the window. She was like, I was like, but Grandma, he can help you. She was like, a Black person to come by, right? Like I don't deal with that. I was like, okay, well, I guess if I grew up in segregated Florida, South Carolina, I would do the same thing. Like she was like, my world does not exist for white people. Everything she did was with Black people.
And again, I think for us, it's like we don't know what was his motivation. We weren't there. We weren't in his mind.
That's being inside his head. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is I'm going back to Black people could not testify against white people in a court of law.
Yeah.
We could not accuse them. We could not testify. When we became police officers, we could not arrest them. And that same mentality, I don't know what they do inside these police academies. And I'm salty because people keep talking about there are good cops out there. I need a cop, a current cop, or retired cop to tell me, so what did they train? How did they train y'all? What did they tell y'all? Because I'm at a loss for words, how it is that this continues to be replicated year after year. But what I'm saying is that it's that same mentality that Black cops don't treat white perpetrators the way Black perpetrators or alleged perpetrators are treated by white cops.
Well, and there's actually a lot of research on this, and I think this is really interesting because when I was in grad school, we had to take this class, social psychology, not the most it wasn't a fun class, but it was full of information, because one of the things that I got really clear about is the information. There's a ton of research where they know flat out that a black man without a gun is more likely to be shot than a white man with a gun. They know that. It's in the research data. It's there, period, point blank. They know that black people receive less empathy, whether it be from their own people, black people, or white folks. There's all kinds of data that talk about what is going on. We know about they call it intrinsic bias, and so they have all these fancy words for white supremacy and racism is systemic oppression. And they know that these things exist. They know that it is the foundation of not just policing in the system, that it is a foundation of the system overall. So we can see this information in social psychology. What is happening is that we sit in our ivory towers, we sit in research institutions, and we talk to each other. When we have PhDs, we do research and we send off that research to a journal. Our peers are going to evaluate that, and then it gets published in the journal, and our peers are going to read it. And we don't put our behinds on the line and talk to our people about what is going on. This stuff is in the data. There are people that are talking about the problems that are systemic, that are based on racism. So none of this stuff is a surprise. There is a ton of data to support it. But what also happens, and I have to balance that on the other side, is that the people that get funded for research, number one, and the people who get a voice that goes beyond just talking to other colleagues in research settings are folks that are going to serve the same agenda. Those are the voices that get elevated the loudest. And I think that that's the thing that we have to recognize. So when you look at white supremacy, what we saw on Wednesday was the height of white supremacy.
Yes.
It is not a surprise. It is not something that is new. It is the foundation of this country. Period. Point blank.
Period. Point blank. And I saw one commentator who said this was not a coup. Well, this was not an attempted coup. This was white power flexing. That's what it was. That's all it was a flex.
And what we need to be clear about when we see this is that this is a test run.
Yes.
This is not something that is going to disappear. So whether it be the white supremacists and the domestic terrorists that are in this country, whether it be someone like Putin, who Putin is sitting there like, hey, it worked. They're going to do this again.
I mean, they're not going to stop, right? Like this is just like, you say it's an attempt. This is like the first step. Like I said, it's a long game, right? So you obviously now they've sowed seeds of mistrust in elections. That's huge. So every single time, oh, y'all cheated. Well, I'm gonna object. That's gonna go on forever. Unless they do what they didn't do in the Civil War, which is you don't let these people re-enter society as like normal people. You make it illegal to carry a Trump flag. Literally ban him the way you did Nazi symbolism, where you did mention of Hitler. You got to stop that. We let Robert E. Lee have statues. We named streets after him. We said, oh, you can have a coup. You can work against the United States. You can feed lies to people, and we're gonna name everything after you. Colleges, streets, whatever.
Well, and I know we got to wrap up here, ladies. And what we also are doing, if we look at the Civil War as an example, and I'm not a historian, I'm just a nerd that happens to like, those periods of time. When you look at that, remember, Robert E. Lee, he never was tried for treason.
Never.
Girl,
He spent his treasonous life in Canada. He spent the rest of his treasonous life in Canada.
And the rest of them, all them slave owners, after they said to black people, we gonna give you some of this land, y'all been living here, tending it, gave it right back to these white traitorous people. and pay them reparations,
Pay
pay the
them.
Civil War widows
Compensated
and
them.
all these people reparations, and they did not give us any.
Not a dime.
So we got people that are watching. So this and I want to get each of you to kind of give out your closing comment. Well, my closing comment to you is that every single time you talk about the Confederate flag, every single time you talk about the Civil War, all of that stuff, not only do we need to ban it, not only do we need to take all those statues down, every single time you talk about them folks, you need to call them traitors. That's what they were to the United States. And I'm not even saying that you got to have like this whole thing of like you a patriot, whatever, however, because our ancestors did not come here by choice, but because we built this damn country and we have a right to be here, we have a right to call people traitors. The people that were terrorists on Wednesday were traitors to the United States. The people that they descend from, that fought in the Civil War, the people that fly them Confederate flags, they are traitors to this country. And you need to call them that every single time.
I disagree. And those will be my closing comments. I disagree.
Okay.
The founder of the guy who created the Confederate flag said it stands for white supremacy. He was very, very clear. It's all of us who are not clear. It's about white supremacy. And they will never, these people from Wednesday, these people who are the descendants of the Confederates, they will never, ever be seen as traitors or as treasonous because they stand for white supremacy, which is the same thing that Donald Trump stands for, which is the same thing that Joseph Biden stands for, regardless of who he keeps around him.
Ashe. All right, Corrie, Estee, what y'all got for me?
Well, I'll let Estee finish because I'm sure she's going to have something more wise than what I'm about to say. But understand, like you said, we have agency. Somebody, you don't have to like us. You don't have to like Black people. You don't have to even want to be around us. But in the case of this upcoming administration, what we were not going to do is, even if Biden is a white supremacist, what we're not going to do is allow him to put in certain things of white supremacy. We're not going to allow him. Because I even saw that he came back out and said, because he had some kind of whatever, oh, maybe we could just build back better or get along. He had to come back out and say, no, if this had been Black people, I understand it wouldn't have been the same. If this has been Black Lives Matter, we wouldn't have seen this, whatever. Like, I recognize this. And like Jim Claiborne said, the first thing Biden needs to do is form a commission to reverse every single thing that he implemented in the 94 climate bill. Like that needs to be the first thing he does. And what we do have is Black people who say, well, that is going to be, you don't have to like me, but what you're going to do is you're going to have to do this. You know, we helped you put there. So what you're going to do is you're going to do this. And what I think that, like I said, we need to call them white supremacists, terrorists, every time they don't get to control the narrative. I'm from South Carolina. They've been running on this lost cause. Maybe we were the real patriots since 1865, right? Like, oh, we're honor. I mean, to the point where in South Carolina, we couldn't even have Martin Luther King. It had to be Confederate Soldiers Holiday / Martin Luther King Day. We couldn't even say that it was just Black people. We're just really happy to honor. And so what I know is there's not going to be whatever this is / President's Day. No, Donald Trump don't get no President's Day. He don't get nothing. Like when we talk about we're honoring something, that means we are not honoring him. And we need to be very clear about that, right? This is not the first coup in the United States. Obviously, y'all need to read about Wilmington, 1898. Right. Many white people done took over, ran Black people out of office. They know how to do it. So what we need to do is be prepared for how this is a part of their long game and make sure that even if they don't like us, they're going to have to respect us.
And I see Chinzira made a comment. She was talking to you, Dr. Claiborne. She said that they need to criminalize the behavior of the Trump supporters like they did in Germany in World War II. And I think we do need to learn lessons because when we look at Hitler, he attempted a coup. We know that. It failed. but then a decade later, he was in power.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why, like, people are like, what does it matter if you impeach him now? You impeach him and say he can never run for any office ever again. We need to be clear. We know he's going to try to come back. So
even if he doesn't try to come back, I think the symbolism of impeaching him, I think the symbolism of, and like Tani said, they're not going to expel these people, but the Treason caucus, the symbolism of saying we're going to expel you from Congress, I think is significant. The symbolism of taking down all of those Confederate monuments of these traitors to the United States, I think is important for us to do that stuff.
And I know we got to get to ER, but we have to be careful of symbolism. We can say all of these things about Trump and do all of these, have all these plans. It was 70 million people that voted for Trump. 70. What we gonna do about them folk?
And we ain't got time for that, because that's a whole other conversation. That is a whole other conversation.
Right.
Because folks running around here talking about they were surprised. I was like, I wasn't.
No, I'm just saying that when we talk about what the symbol of impeachment to Trump will do, it's 70 million other Trumps out there. So we knocking off one at a time, and we got 69,999,999 more to go.
Well, and there's one, and I'm coming to you, Estee. There's one in particular. And people said this. So one of the things that you got to know about it, because we go back to this antisocial personality disorder, one of the things that you have to know is, so this was a messy one. This is the one that brings people out and kind of rallies people up. It's like the hype man before the main act comes on. Mm-hmm. This is the hype man.
Yeah.
And so remember that those opening acts are never as smooth is the main one. And I guarantee you that the next one, he gonna look pretty or she gonna look pretty.
Which was actually part of my closing comment, which is what came to me when I took some time yesterday and started combing through everything, is I was like, this is the dress rehearsal.
Oh yeah, baby.
This is the dress rehearsal. So if closing comments, it would be 2. In response to this is your dress rehearsal, we got to keep the same energy, right? The way that we have been organizing and structuring ourselves and the conversations that we are having amongst us as Black folks. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have a colleague from graduate school who was like, my son is going to turn 18 before January 5th. You're going to vote for the first time. Like, we usually don't pay the same attention to runoffs and local election and who are our city officials and those kinds of things. We got to keep this same energy and make sure that we are funneling this righteous rage into our voting rights, into our organization, into the work that we're doing in our homes and in our communities. And my other closing, which might seem to be in contrast, is I do want us, as much as we can, it's the real experience, the energy of it, how we experience the trauma of watching that is serious. And to the extent that we can be unbothered about it, to the extent that we can create Black joy and stay at home and love our partners and hold our children tighter, and to do something this weekend, like take a bath and take a moment to have some meditation time and to sit and to pray and to, buy yourself some flowers and have them in the house and cook dinner. I think that sacred time that we can curate for ourselves would be just as vital as the organizing and the way that we're experiencing this to be motivational for us, so that we are doing as much to take care of our spirits as we are to debunk and destroy these systems.
So we have to be charged. Absolutely.
Ooh, and that really goes to what this whole moment is really about, and why I don't focus on this. So we had this conversation today, but it will be a long time before I have any kind of conversation about the sociopath in chief and his minions again, because it's not what I want to focus on. Because at the end of the day, this demonic spirit, and I'm an Ifa practitioner, I don't even believe in the devil, but I'm a barter to my Christian sisters. Okay.
Listen, I've been saying the whole time, we got to pray the devil back to hell. Now, I don't even have a devil, but if there was one, this is what it looked like.
I literally said that too. That devil, we got to pray
this devil
every day. Hello, everybody listening, everybody in the light, all of y'all, God and everybody else. We got to send him back.
And what did
all the way down?
And what did we do? We organized.
That's
it
right.
ain't perfect. It is not perfect, but I bet you, you showed them better than we could tell their asses.
We did. Because if y'all had left Stacey alone, it might not have looked like this. If the government election hadn't been stolen, this might have gone a little different.
She's like, God.
That being said, thank you for all the energy. I see all the beautiful comments from my sister Chinzira, Ola Ifa, is it Aqua Blue, Stephanie, Eric. Thank you so much for connecting with us on this Friday as we had this conversation. I'm always just honored to be in conversation. If I am a knife, these are the women that are keeping me sharp. My sister's Estee Nena Dillard. She is a Reverend. She is the owner of Endless Spiritual Consulting, and she is a queer sexologist. My sister friend all the way in California. She done woke up early this morning to have this conversation with us. Tani Chimurenga is a journalist, a writer, and a social commentator, and my friend that always just shows up for me and goes riding with me on these conversations, Dr. Corrie Claiborne. She's associate professor of literature at Morehouse College. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all for watching.